What U.S. drought has been the costliest in terms of financial damages?
There have been many severe droughts in the United States over the course of history. The most famous one is the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. However, in terms of money, the costliest drought thus far has been the 1988 to 1989 drought that resulted in an estimated $40 billion hit to the U.S. economy. Over half the country's population was negatively affected.
What did the continents look like in the past?
Because of the movement of the lithospheric plates, the continents' positions have changed over time. For example, some scientists believe that about 700 million years ago a huge continent called Rodinia formed around the equator, about 500 million years ago. The continent broke apart, forming Laurasia, today's North America, and Eurasia, and Gondwana, or Gondwanaland, today's South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and India. Then, about 250 million years ago, the continents were once again together in one massive supercontinent called Pangaea, or Pangaea, translated as all land. Eventually, the huge continent began to break up, forming Laurasia and Gondwana again.
What are some other unexpected places where it has snowed in the United States?
In Louisiana, 2 feet, 61 centimeters, of snow fell on the town of Rain on February 14, 1895. Another old record is held by Savannah, Georgia, where 18 inches, 46 centimeters, of the white stuff fell on January 10, 1800. More recently, residents of New Orleans were surprised to see snow accumulations on their front lawns on December 11, 2008.
What are cosmic rays?
Cosmic rays are invisible, high-energy particles that constantly bombard Earth from all directions. Most cosmic rays are protons moving at extremely high speeds. But they can be atomic nuclei of any known element. They enter Earth's atmosphere at velocities of 90% the speed of light or more.
Did the ancient Mayans study the weather?
Many people are familiar with the Mayans' interest in calendars and astronomy. But they were also fascinated by the weather. Sometime between 1200 and 1400 CE they constructed a lighthouse in what is now Cozumel, Mexico, called the Tumba del Caracol. The Mayans put candles in the lighthouse. which served the traditional function of warning ships that they were close to land. In addition, at the top of this lighthouse, the clever Mayans strategically placed a variety of seashells. Depending on wind speed and direction, the shells would whistle at different pitches. Depending on which shells were whistling and at what pitch and their knowledge of what conditions produce storms, the Mayans are said to have been able to predict storms approaching from the Caribbean. The objects are small glass spheres containing various amounts of liquid and gas, and also attached to a piece of metal that is suspended from each one. These floats have varying levels of buoyancy, which could be finely adjusted further by changing the size of the piece of metal attached. Galileo understood that water's density changed with temperature, and so the buoys, distinguished by the color of the dyed fluid inside them, would rise or fall within the tube accordingly. You could tell the temperature based on which buoys were floating and which ones had sunk to the bottom of the tube. In 1610, Galileo replaced the water in the tube with wine, alcohol. Galileo's friend Sant'Orio 1561 to 1636, adapted the thermometer to measure body temperature in his medical practice.
What is a concentric eye wall?
Most hurricanes are centered around one eye, but sometimes a secondary eye wall surrounds this eye. The second eye wall surrounds the first, and is thus called a concentric eye wall.
What is a wedge tornado?
A wedge tornado is one that appears as a thick, squat column. The observable height of the funnel is about the same as the width.
Where is the horizon?
Depending on your elevation above sea level and assuming no objects such as mountains are obscuring your view and the sky is perfectly clear, the horizon appears at different distances. To calculate how far the visible horizon is, first measure the distance between the ground and your eye level. Add to this the measurement of how high your elevation is. If your total is in feet, multiply by 1.5 and then take the square root of the result, which will be in miles, if you used meters as your measuring unit. Multiply by 13 and then take the square root, the result will be in kilometers.
Is there such a thing as a megacrometeor?
Yes. Megacrometeors are not hailstones because they don't form in clouds the way hailstones do. They are giant ice stones that do not require thunderstorms in order to form. Megacrometeors range in size from about a third of a pound, half a kilogram, to a monstrous one found in Brazil that weighed 137 pounds, 62 kilograms.
How does the wind chill factor affect temperature?
Also known as the wind chill index. It is a number that expresses the cooling effect of moving air at different temperatures. The National Weather Service began reporting the equivalent wind chill temperature, along with the actual air temperature, in 1973. For years it was believed that the index overestimated the wind's cooling effect on the skin. A new wind chill index was thus instituted in 2001, and other adjustments have since been made, too.
What was the first university to offer a degree in meteorology in the United States?
The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was the first institute of higher education to offer a meteorology degree. Swedish meteorologist Carl Gustav Rossby, 1898 to 1957, founded the program there in 1928. Rossby would go on to found programs at the University of California at Los Angeles and the University of Chicago, as well.
Have the Great Lakes ever been completely frozen over?
There have been occasions when the Great Lakes completely froze, which last happened in 1979. In the winter of 1993 to 1994, the lakes almost froze solid, but not completely. Even though this does not happen often, the Great Lakes generally shut down to shipping. Traffic during the months of January through March because the ice is far too hazardous.
What are monsoons?
Occurring in southern Asia, monsoons are winds that flow from the ocean to the continent during the summer and from the continent to the ocean in the winter. The winds come from the southwest from April to October, and from the northeast, the opposite direction, from October to April. The summer monsoons bring a great deal of moisture to the land. They cause deadly floods in low-lying river valleys, but also provide the water southern Asia relies upon for agriculture.
Is there actual salt in sea air?
Yes. The air above the sea and along the coast does contain salt. On average, the concentration of salt in sea air is about 3.5 million parts per cubic foot. 100,000 parts per cubic meter. Salt air can penetrate inland up to thousands of miles. Depending on wind and air pressure conditions, and can aid in the formation of clouds because the salt particles serve as nuclei around which drops of precipitation can form. Haze along seashores is also the result of salt particles, with haze droplets typically forming when the humidity level reaches 75% or more.
What is humidifier fever?
If you do not clean your humidifier according to the manufacturer's recommendations, bacteria and mold may begin to grow on it, which could make you sick. Also, distilled water, not tap water, should be used in a humidifier because dissolved minerals in tap water can cause a fine white powder to blow in your home that can also encourage germs to spread. Though a variety of illnesses, ranging from allergic reactions to the common cold, could develop as a result. If they stem from a poorly maintained humidifier, they might all be classified as humidifier fever.
How big do sunspots get?
Sunspots can range from the relatively small and, except with a telescope, unobservable, to the staggeringly enormous. The biggest sunspots can be more than 100,000 miles, 161,000 kilometers, across. Astronomers measure sunspots in millionths, with each millionth being 1/1,000,000th of the surface area of the Sun that is facing the Earth. The Earth, if it were a sunspot on the surface of the Sun, would be equal to 169 millionths. Compare that with the typical sunspot, which ranges from 300 to 500 millionths, and you get an idea of how big they are. One of the largest sunspots ever measured was seen in 2001 and was 2,400 millionths. But that does not account for how far the solar flares emanating from sunspots shoot out into space. Solar flares can be as long as 100,000 miles, 161,000 kilometers. And some of the energy they emit can literally stretch to Earth's orbit, 93 million miles, 150 million kilometers, away.
What is the eye of a hurricane?
The eye of a hurricane is a region of relative calm in the middle of the swirling storm. Hurricane eyes range in size from 4 to 40 miles, 7 to 74 kilometers, in diameter. Although Hurricane Wilma had an eye only 2 miles 3.2 kilometers wide, and can be so free of clouds that sunshine can be seen. The more intense the hurricane, the smaller the eye tends to be. The eye is surrounded by the eye wall. An apt phrase because it is literally a circular wall that can reach 7 miles, 11.3 kilometers, into the sky. Once past the eye wall, the hurricane resumes. With winds blowing as fast as 150 miles per hour, 278 kilometers per hour, or more.
What is the evidence supporting global warming?
More and more scientists are becoming convinced that we are seeing an increasingly swift transition toward a warmer climate on Earth. Data is constantly being collected by meteorologists, environmentalists, and other scientists working in labs and out in the field. While there is no definitive proof that will assuage all doubters, the evidence is mounting. Below are some of the reasons why the fear of global warming is gaining ground. Record-breaking temperatures. Cities around the world have been recording high temperatures in the last decade or two that have exceeded all previous records. Drought and rain pattern changes. Dry areas are becoming drier, and wet areas are becoming wetter. Floods are becoming more frequent, as rivers fill with record levels of water. For example, the American Midwest and Great Plains states have seen significant increases in flooding in recent years. Though part of this can be blamed on farming and levee activities. The Northwest is also seeing much more rain, while the Southwest and especially, southeastern states have been experiencing extended droughts. More extreme weather. Some, though certainly not all, scientists feel that hurricane and tornado activity appears to be on the rise, with the United States and Southeast Asia being particularly hard hit. One of the worst years of recent memory, 2005. Included the devastating Hurricane Katrina that destroyed New Orleans and other Gulf Coast cities. Climatologists noted that there had been a lull in hurricanes during the 1970s and 1980s. But since 1995 there has been a significant upswing. Between 1995 and 2005, 9 of the hurricane seasons had above normal incidence of storms. Warming oceans, coral reef bleaching. There is widespread and undisputed evidence that coral reefs around the globe are in trouble. Although coral reefs occur in tropical, warm waters, too much warming will kill coral. First, because the organisms simply don't tolerate such temperatures. And second, because warmer water is not able to maintain as much dissolved calcium, which coral need to survive. When corals die, the vivid colors the tiny animals lend reefs disappear, hence the term bleaching. Melting glaciers. The most commonly used piece of evidence for global warming has been the changes seen in glaciers, especially in the north, but also in Antarctica and on mountaintops around the world. Photographs have shown, for example, that Greenland glaciers are retreating at a rate of about 100 feet, 30 meters, per day. In Antarctica, the Larsen ice shelf, covering an area roughly the size of Rhode Island, broke off the mainland. Meanwhile, the glacier on top of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania is quickly melting. And scientists speculate there will be no more snow on the mountain by 2020.
What are microclimates?
Microclimates are small-scale regions where the average weather conditions are measurably different from the larger, surrounding region. Differences in temperature, precipitation, wind, or cloud cover can produce microclimates. Frequent causes of microclimates are differences in elevation, mountains that alter wind patterns, shorelines, and man-made structures that can alter wind patterns.
How is wind direction usually measured?
A wind vane is the common instrument used to discover wind direction. Wind vanes look like windmills mounted on a pole that allows them to rotate toward the direction of the oncoming wind. Historically, wind vanes have often come in decorative models, often with a rooster or some other farm animal mounted on the top. Of course, there are many other ways to discover wind direction, ranging from the primitive analyzing the direction smoke is blowing or how balloons are moving, to the more sophisticated, such as Doppler sonar, sound radar, and LiDAR, light radar. Gyroscopes and GPS devices mounted in airplanes can calculate airspeed by comparing the indicated speed to the actual distance covered, i.e., the amount of thrust from the airplane's jets or propellers may be slowed or sped up, depending on whether winds are blowing with or against the plane.
What are nacreous clouds?
Nacreous clouds are clouds that occur at elevations of 12 to 20 miles, 19 to 32 kilometers high, rarely at lower altitudes, and look like cirrus or altocumulus lenticularis clouds. Often quite beautiful, they are sometimes called mother-of-pearl clouds because of irisation. Supercooled water droplets causing refraction of sunlight that gives the edges of these clouds multiple colors in a kind of mother-of-pearl effect. Seen in northern climes, such as Alaska, Scotland, and Scandinavia. These clouds form only a couple hours before sunrise or after sunset.
Is there a classification system for snowflakes?
Humankind has an affinity for classifying just about anything, and that includes snowflakes. In 1951, the International Commission on Snow and Ice, yes, there was such a commission, created a system for putting a name on each type of snowflake. A daunting task when one considers that no two flakes are alike.
Is global warming causing the world's glaciers to melt?
Many scientists believe that greenhouse gases are directly causing glaciers in all parts of the world to melt and recede at an unprecedented rate. It is thought that by 2030 there will be no glaciers in Glacier National Park in Montana. In East Africa. Mt. Kenya's Lewis Glacier in Kenya has lost 40% of its size in just the last 25 years.
How much of the Earth was covered in ice during the various ice ages?
Because of extensive erosion, it is difficult to determine the extent of ice sheets during the various ice ages. But scientists do know some things about the last ice age, the Pleistocene Ice Age, a time when up to 10% of the Earth was covered, although not simultaneously, by often miles-high ice. At their greatest extent, the Northern Hemisphere glaciers and ice sheets covered most of Canada, all of New England, much of the upper Midwest, large areas of Alaska, most of Greenland, Iceland, Svalbard, and other Arctic islands, Scandinavia, much of Great Britain and Ireland, and the northwestern part of the former Soviet Union. In the southern hemisphere, glaciers were much smaller, with the main effects being cooler and much drier weather. During the last stage of the Ice Age, the Wisconsin stage in the United States, ice sheets covered parts of Eurasia and much of North America, extending as far south as Pennsylvania. As the climate warmed up, scientists estimate that sea level rose about 410 feet. 125 meters, an average rate of an inch, 2.5 centimeters, per year for roughly 5,000 years. Interestingly, although most of the huge northern ice sheets melted, the Antarctic ice sheet decreased by only 10%.
What are the four major cloud groups and their types?
Clouds are categorized in the following manner. 1. High clouds are composed almost entirely of ice crystals. The bases of these clouds start at 16,500 feet, 5,000 meters, and reach up to 45,000 feet, 13,650 meters. A. Cirrus clouds, from the Latin for lock of hair, are thin, feathery crystal clouds that appear in patches or narrow bands. B. Cirrostratus clouds are thin, white clouds that resemble veils or sheets. These clouds can be striated or fibrous in appearance. Because of the ice content, they are associated with the halos that surround the sun or moon. C. Cirrocumulus clouds are thin clouds that appear as small white flakes or cottony patches. They may contain supercooled water. 2. Middle clouds are composed primarily of water. The height of the cloud bases range from 6,500 to 23,000 feet, 2,000 to 7,000 meters. A. Altostratus clouds appear as bluish or grayish veils or layers of clouds that can gradually merge into altocumulus clouds. The sun may be dimly visible through them, but flat, thick sheets of these clouds can obscure the Sunday B. Altocumulus clouds are white or gray and occur in layers or patches of solid clouds with rounded shapes. 3. Low clouds are composed almost entirely of water and may at times be supercooled. At subfreezing temperatures, snow and ice crystals may be present as well. The bases of these clouds start near Earth's surface and climb to 6,500 feet, 2,000 meters. In the middle latitudes, stratus clouds are gray, uniform, sheet-like clouds with a relatively low base, but they can also be patchy, shapeless, low gray clouds. Sometimes thin enough for the sun to shine through, these clouds bring drizzle and snow. Stratocumulus clouds are globular, rounded masses that form at the top of the layer. Nimbostratus clouds are gray or dark, relatively shapeless, massive clouds that contain rain, snow, and ice pellets. 4 clouds with vertical development contain supercooled water above the freezing level and grow to great heights. The cloud bases range from 1,000 feet, 300 meters, to 10,000 feet, 3,300 meters. Cumulus clouds are detached, fair weather clouds with relatively flat bases and dome-shaped tops. These usually do not have extensive vertical development and do not produce precipitation. Cumulonimbus clouds are unstable, large, vertical clouds with dense boiling tops that bring showers, hail, thunder, and lightning.
What is a meteor shower?
Meteors are often called shooting stars because they are bright for a moment and move quickly across the sky. Usually, a shooting star appears in the sky about once an hour or so. Sometimes, though, a large number of meteors appear in the sky over the course of several nights. These meteors will appear to come from the same part of the sky, and dozens or hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of meteors can be seen every hour. We call such dazzling displays meteor showers. The strongest meteor showers are sometimes called meteor storms.
Do we have any evidence of global warming in the past?
Yes, there is a great deal of evidence for global warming events in the past. The following lists 2 of the more well-known ones. Mid-Cretaceous period. During this period, between about 120 and 90 million years ago, new ocean crust was produced at about twice the normal rate. Large volcanic plateaus were forming in the ocean basins, ocean temperatures were very high, and there was a peak in worldwide petroleum formation. Just as startling was the sea level, which was about 330 to 660 feet. 100 to 200 meters, higher than at present. The reasons for the high temperatures were probably numerous, including the release of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, by volcanic eruptions, creating a supergreenhouse effect. This led to temperatures about 20 to 22 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, above our current average global temperatures. Interestingly enough, it is thought that the large volume of basalts that erupted on the ocean floor displaced a great deal of ocean water, causing sea levels to rise. And with the rise in sea level and temperatures, organisms flourished, eventually providing material necessary for petroleum formation. Eocene period during this time, between about 55 to 38 million years ago. Temperatures also increased, with tropical vegetation reaching about 45 to 55 degrees north and south of the equator, or about 15 degrees higher than today. Based on rock samples, it appears that the Earth had between 2 and 6 times the amount of carbon dioxide we have today. Scientists believe this global warming was caused by continental collisions. Events that released large amounts of this greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. This also shows how the rock cycle and tectonic processes can affect atmospheric conditions.
What is a Mauka breeze?
A Mauka breeze is the Hawaiian term for cooling winds that sweep down from the volcanic mountains to cool the warmer, lower regions of the islands.
Why is infrared light from the sun important?
Infrared light from the sun provides about 50% of the solar energy that reaches Earth in the form of heat. Without it, our planet would be a much colder place. The rest of the heat energy comes from light in the visible spectrum range that, after it is absorbed, radiates back into the atmosphere in the form of heat.
Do large-scale weather patterns lead to season trends?
Generally, no. One might believe, for example, that a milder than normal winter might be followed by a warmer than usual spring and summer. Actually, meteorologists have found no such reliable patterns. In fact, many times a warm winter is followed by a cold spring, or vice versa. A good example of this is the winter of 1994 to 1995. In the northern United States that season, there was a lot less snow and ice, and urban areas such as Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota, saved lots of money on road salt. However, the following spring was decidedly colder, and Minnesotans saw ice-covered lakes and ponds well into the month of May. Looking back farther in history, the Dust Bowl years of the 1930s saw severe extremes, with the United States experiencing many of its all-time record lows and highs in 1933, 1934, 1936, and 1937.
What happens to the sun every 22 years?
The sunspot activity on the sun is related to the magnetic field change the sun goes through. Every 22 years, the Sun's magnetic field completely reverses. Magnetic north becomes magnetic south and vice versa. Other than having something to do with sunspot activity. Astronomers do not believe that this flipping affects our weather in any way.
How was the Fahrenheit scale developed?
The temperature scale still in use in the United States, while the rest of the world uses the metric system of Celsius. Is named after German engineer and physicist Gabriel Fahrenheit, 1686 to 1736. Fahrenheit developed his scale after visiting Danish astronomer Ole Christensen Romer. 1644 to 1710, in 1708. For his experiments, Romer was using an alcohol thermometer upon which he had marked a scale from 0 degrees, the lowest temperature he could achieve in his laboratory using a mixture of ice, water, and salt, to 60 degrees, the boiling point of water. This system actually mimics the basic idea behind the Celsius scale. While Fahrenheit left no records as to why he chose certain high and low points on his thermometers, there has been speculation on this matter. It is known that he used his own body temperature as the high point on his thermometer. But he marked this temperature as 96 degrees. Some believe he chose this number because it was easily divisible by 2s and 3s. For his 0-degree mark he used Romer's figure. Fahrenheit later determined that water normally froze at 32 degrees on his scale and boiled at 212 degrees.
What is a wall cloud?
Wall clouds can be warnings that a tornado is about to form in a bank of cumulonimbus clouds. As a mesocyclone expands and gains strength below the cumulonimbus clouds, it begins rotating as warm, humid air moves upward and condenses. Convergence causes the gathering wall cloud to rotate cyclonically. Though slowly compared to the tornadoes it could form. Storm chasers who observe such wall clouds know that they can form full-fledged tornadoes within an hour's time.
What are Aeolian sounds?
The somewhat musical, sometimes mournful sound wind makes when blowing across branches, wires, or circular objects is called an Aeolian sound. Aeolus was the Greek god of wind. An Aeolian is a musical term used to refer to wind instruments or to a diatonic scale.
What is a cloud?
Clouds are collections of trillions of rain droplets suspended in the atmosphere. These droplets consist of water or ice crystals that condense around a nucleus, usually a dust or other small particle. such as pollen, volcanic ash, mineral flakes, or other organic or inorganic materials. To form, clouds require air that has cooled to the point where the air is saturated with moisture or ice crystals. In other words, when the humidity reaches 100%. Each cloud droplet is only a few micrometers in diameter. And it takes a million such droplets to form a single raindrop.
How is the wind chill calculated?
Wind chill is calculated using the following formula. Wind chill equals 35.74 plus 0.6215 T, 35.75, V 0.16, plus 0.4275 T, V 0.16. The wind chill is in degrees Fahrenheit, T is the air temperature, and V is the wind speed in miles per hour. Above is the official wind chill chart from the National Weather Service as of 2009.
What is the worst avalanche disaster on record?
In 1970, an avalanche in Yungay, Peru, killed 20,000 people.
How do some animals appear to be able to predict an oncoming storm?
There is a considerable amount of folklore and old wives' tales about how to predict the weather based on animal behavior. On the other hand, there do, in fact, seem to be ways one can tell if a storm is approaching, just by observing animals. Biologists and other scientists, as well as other people who work with animals daily, have noted some truth to the following: geese tend not to fly when a storm is nearing. One explanation for this is that air pressure drops when foul weather approaches, and it might be harder for some larger birds, such as Canada geese, to get off the ground in such conditions. More likely, though, is that the birds instinctively understand that lower air pressure is a good indication of an upcoming storm. Seagulls and other ocean birds also tend to remain grounded before bad weather ensues. Many farmers believe that cows stay away from hilltops and remain close together in herds. Similar behavior has also been observed among deer and elk. Because frogs like it moist and humid, which tends to be the case during and just before stormy weather, they remain out of the water for longer periods of time. You can tell because they are croaking and ribbiting a lot more before it rains. Mosquitoes and biting black flies tend to bite and suck blood with much more ferocity and urgency before bad weather, perhaps saving up so they don't go hungry while they seek shelter from the storm.
What are glaze and rime?
Glaze, as one might infer, is the result of freezing rain or drizzle falling onto surfaces and forming a sheet of ice. Rime, on the other hand, is formed by freezing fog or mist during windy conditions. There are two types of rime, hard rime and soft rime. Soft rime has a milky appearance and forms sugar-like crystals shaped into scales, feathers, or needles on the windward side of thin objects such wires, poles, and tree branches. Hard rime is less milky, comb-like in appearance. It is also more dense and less fragile than soft rime. Hard rime can form in windy weather when the temperature is between 18 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit. -2 to -8 degrees Celsius, and humidity is 90% or more. While soft rime can occur in similar conditions, but when the temperature is below 18 degrees Fahrenheit -2 degrees Celsius.
What are the most polluted cities in the world in terms of air quality?
The most severe air pollution can be found in the following cities: Cairo, Egypt; Delhi, India; Calcutta, India; Tianjin, China; Chongqing, China; Kanpur, India; Lucknow, India; Jakarta, Indonesia; and Shenyang, China.
What else does too much sun do to one's skin?
Besides increasing the risk of skin cancer, melanoma. Sun exposure causes premature wrinkling of the skin and eye cataracts.
What is the Fata Morgana?
This fantastical mirage gets its name from Italy, where this particular type of superior mirage is frequently seen in the Strait of Messina between Sicily and the Italian mainland. Named after the Arthurian legend of Morgan le Fay, who tales tell had a palace beneath the sea. This optical illusion occurs when light diffraction causes distant buildings to appear vertically stretched and, thus, more like castles.
How hot can it get on the Earth's surface?
Temperature records used by meteorologists and reported in weather broadcasts refer to air temperature. The surface of the Earth, however, can get much hotter than the record 120s and 130s degree F. High 40s to high 50s degree C, that are usually considered the extreme. Soil temperatures can actually rise about 180 degrees Fahrenheit 82 degrees Celsius. And the surface temperature in Death Valley has been measured at a hellish 200 degrees Fahrenheit 93 degrees Celsius.
Did a tornado almost change music history?
If you notice the listings of cities in the deadliest U.S. tornadoes table, you may have caught the fact that the fourth listing was Tupelo, Mississippi, the hometown of Elvis Presley, 1935 to 1977. Elvis was just an infant at the time, and he fortunately survived the funnel cloud that killed over 200 people on April 5, 1936.
What are growlers?
Growlers are pieces of floating ice that have broken off from an iceberg.
Is it possible to get frostbite in Hawaii?
Sure. Stand on top of Mount Haleakala on the island of Maui, or Mauna Kea on the Big Island. In the winter, or even spring or summer, and you can easily be exposed to temperatures well below -20 degrees Fahrenheit. -29 degrees Celsius, for a long enough time to develop frostbite.
Does lightning give off X-rays and radio waves?
Almost since the invention of the radio, it has been known that lightning generates radio waves. Since this property of the bolts has long interfered with radio broadcasts. Lightning generates radio waves over a wide range of frequencies, especially in the AM broadcast band. More recently, scientists have become fascinated by lightning's ability to create X-rays. The theory that this might occur was first proposed in the 1920s by Nobel Prize-winning physicist C.T.R. Wilson, 1869 to 1959, who theorized that lightning could accelerate electrons with sufficient speed to produce X-rays. For decades scientists thought Wilson was wrong, because they believed the Earth's atmosphere was too thick and that air resistance would slow down electrons too much. However, by the 1990s scientists began to change their minds. And in 2003 experiments with controlled lightning strokes were performed by Martin Uman at the University of Florida and Joseph Dwyer at the Florida Institute of Technology that demonstrated lightning can indeed produce enough energy to overcome any atmospheric drag. Such new research is causing scientists to rethink how lightning works.
What, then, is hydrometeorology?
Hydrometeorology is an 8-syllable word meaning the study of the exchange of water between the lower atmosphere and the land below it.
What should I do when a tornado approaches?
Try to get to the lowest level of the building, unless you are in a mobile home or outdoors. in which case you should seek a sturdy and safe shelter. Many mobile home parks have a centrally located tornado shelter these days. Go to the center of the room and hide under a sturdy piece of furniture. Stay away from windows, hold onto the leg of a table or something else stable. And protect your head and neck with your arms. If your home has a basement, take shelter there. If not, interior bathrooms are usually the sturdiest rooms in a home. And you can protect yourself further by climbing into the bathtub.
Who first correctly wrote about the structure of snowflakes?
This honor goes to Han Ying, a Han Dynasty scholar who published moral discourses illustrating the Han text of the Book of Songs in 135b. Ce Han correctly described how snowflakes always take on a hexagonal form of some kind. Unless the flakes are broken, even though this six-sided fundamental structure has incredible variety. The Western scientific world would not get this right until the 17th century. When German mathematician and astronomer Johannes Kepler, 1571–1630, published A New Year's Gift, or On the Six-Cornered Snowflake in 1611. English mathematician and astronomer Thomas Harriot, c. 1560–1621, actually correctly described snowflakes' hexagonal form in 1591. But this description was not made public.
What are the two forms of cloud-to-ground lightning?
Cloud-to-ground, CG, strokes of lightning come in negative and positive forms. Negative CGS, which make up about 95% of all such lightning strokes, occur when the ground becomes positively charged. A positive CG does the opposite, and the ground becomes negatively charged. Positive CGS tend to have more power and longer strike time, thus they are more likely to cause damage and are blamed for starting more forest fires.
What is the National Acid Precipitation Assessment Program, NAPAP?
Initiated by the Acid Precipitation Act of 1980. The NAPAP studied acid deposition throughout the United States. After 10 years, the researchers reported to Congress that while acid rain was a problem, the danger was not quite as severe as initially feared. About 4% of the lakes in the United States were deemed unacceptably acidic. And 25% of these lakes had acidic water due to natural causes. For example, decaying vegetation debris can raise water acidity levels.
How hot can the human body get and still survive?
University-level research has included experiments that show that the human Body can withstand a temperature of about 250 degrees Fahrenheit 121 degrees Celsius for up to 15 minutes. A more extreme case in which a professor conducted the research on himself showed that a healthy person could withstand 364 degrees Fahrenheit 184 degrees Celsius for 1 minute.
What are the requirements for a storm to be considered a severe thunderstorm?
In order for it to be categorized as severe, a thunderstorm must have winds exceeding 58 miles. 93 kilometers per hour and or have tornadoes or large hail, or be likely to generate tornadoes or large hail. The National Weather Service issues thunderstorm warnings based on the potential for storms to become severe.
Does the North Pole have the same average temperatures as the South Pole?
One might think that the northern and southern extremes of the planet would have comparable annual temperatures. In actuality, the South Pole is much colder. This is because giant glaciers have built up on the continent of Antarctica, where the South Pole is located. The inland ice sheets of Antarctica are 8,036 feet, 2,450 meters, thick on average. And this thick layer of ice keeps the South Pole about 50 degrees Fahrenheit 23.6 degrees Celsius colder than in the north.
What is a cloud chamber?
Cloud chambers were originally designed to study radioactivity. Scottish physicist Charles Thomson Rees-Wilson, 1869–1959, invented the chamber in 1912. Winning the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1927 for his invention. The procedure involved saturating an enclosed chamber in water vapor until it was supersaturated. Ionized particles would then be passed through the chamber, serving as nuclei around which droplets would form. This had the advantage of making the particles visible to physicists, and the behavior of the particles could be studied.
Wasn't 2008 one of the coolest years for the United States?
Yes, for the United States the 2008 temperature averages were the lowest since 1997. Also, precipitation was way up that year, which, along with it being a La Nina year, is a primary reason why meteorologists believe it was a considerably cooler season. The average temperature from January to October 2008 was 55.9 degrees Fahrenheit 13.3 degrees Celsius versus 55.7 degrees Fahrenheit 13.2 degrees Celsius in 1997. This made 2008 actually a fairly average year with regard to records kept over the last 114 years. However, global temperatures were the ninth highest on record in 2008.
Why do sunspots appear dark?
Sunspots are a slightly cooler temperature, about 2000 degrees Fahrenheit 1100 degrees Celsius cooler than their surrounding photospheric gas, and so in the bright backlighting, sunspots appear dark. Do not be fooled, though, a sunspot is still many thousands of degrees. And the amount of electromagnetic energy that courses through sunspots is tremendous.
Is global warming causing deserts to expand?
Desertification. The expansion of deserts and corresponding decrease in fresh water supplies is the result of several factors, including agricultural misuse, overpopulation, drought, and also climate change. There is no question whatsoever that the world's deserts are increasing in acreage at an alarming rate, and that freshwater lakes and other water supplies are shrinking and turning to dust. Many examples may be cited, but here are just a few. Lake Chad, which has water shared by the African nations of Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad, is 95% smaller than it was in the 1960s. Kazakhstan has lost half of its productive farmland since 1980. Sandstorms in Iran have engulfed more than 100 villages since 2002. The Gobi Desert in China is growing quickly, destroying land and causing giant dust storms that cost the country $6.5 billion every year. It is estimated that, by 2025, 3/4 of Africa will face starvation because of the loss of water and farmland. Population migration and fights over resources are leading to wars, especially in Africa, such as the current conflict in Sudan.
What are the two major characteristics of volcanic eruptions?
A volcano can experience violent eruptions or less explosive, more effusive eruptions that produce wide-ranging lava flows. In general, the eruptive characteristics of a volcano are based on the silica and water content of the magma.
What is a banjo barometer?
The banjo barometer is a barometer set into a banjo-shaped case. It was developed by Robert Hooke, 1635 to 1703, and was a very popular design because the large dial was easy to read and was large enough so that you could get very detailed readings.
How is a corona different from a halo?
As with the corona or anti-corona, Halos are created by light passing through clouds of ice crystals. Coronas, when they have some color to them, are reddish on the outside of the ring and bluish on the inside. While halos are red on the inside and blue on the outside. Coronas tend to be formed when altostratus clouds are present, while halos occur with cirrostratus clouds in the air. A halo's radius extends at a 22-degree angle from the moon or sun, but on rare occasions subtends at 46 degrees. Coronas have smaller angular diameters than halos. Because the cirrostratus clouds causing halos contain icy crystals that could lead to rain. Folklore about the sighting of halos correctly concluded that halos may predict oncoming rain.
What is a hectopascal?
A hectopascal, HPA, is the same thing as a millibar. Some meteorologists, especially outside the United States, use hectopascals instead of millibars or inches of mercury because the HPA is the International System of Units, SI, standard.
What is acid rain?
Motor vehicles and industrial activity release tons of pollutants into the air. When mixed together, the pollutants form sulfuric and nitric acids that later fall to the ground in rain or snow. This precipitation is known as acid rain. Acid rain is responsible for damaging lakes by killing plant and animal life and for killing trees around the world. Canada has been especially hard hit by acid rain caused by industrial activities in the United States.
What is Buys-Ballott's law?
Dutch meteorologist and chemist Christoph Hendrik Diederik Buys-Ballot, 1817 to 1890, was a pioneer in meteorology, especially when it came to explaining how air flows in large weather systems. The law that bears his name refers to the fact that when you stand with your back to the wind, the air pressure will be lower on your left than on your right in the northern hemisphere. And the opposite is true if you are standing in the southern hemisphere. This phenomenon, which actually only proves to be true during well-organized weather systems, was also discovered by American climatologist William Ferrel, 1817 to 1891. Ferrel actually formulated this theory a few months before Buys-Ballot. The Dutchman graciously acknowledged that the credit deserved to go to Ferrel. But the law had already been denoted Buys-Ballot's law, and the name stuck. Trade winds are very consistent winds blowing through the tropics, between 30 degrees south and 30 degrees north latitudes. At about 11 to 14 miles, 18 to 22 kilometers per hour, sometimes for days on end. In the northern hemisphere they blow toward the equator from the northeast. And south of the equator they blow in from the southeast. while the term trade winds leads most people to think they got their names from the days when large sailing ships depended on them for shipping routes. The word trade actually has a German origin and means track or path.
What is El Niño?
El Niño refers to the phenomenon that occurs when warming waters in the tropical Pacific build up around Christmas time. It is a fairly regular occurrence, every 2 to 7 years, but usually every 3 to 4 years. And with powerful ones every 10 to 15 years, and because it happens around Christmas. Spanish-speaking people called it El Niño after the Christ child. Meteorologists often refer to it as the ENSO, which is short for El Niño Southern Oscillation. The term Southern Oscillation was coined by Sir Gilbert Thomas Walker, 1868 to 1958. A British statistician and physicist who was studying the pattern of Indian monsoon seasons. The El Niño effect influences weather not only along the Pacific coasts of the Americas, but also worldwide. The consequences range from colder than normal temperatures in the central and eastern United States to strong storms in Africa, Australia, and the coast of California. Flooding in Europe, and declines in fish populations in South America. Climatologists increasingly believe that strong El Niños increase droughts in Africa and may be accelerating desertification there. A moderate El Niño effect was in action during the years 2006 through 2008.